Hello, hello. I believe we are live. Maybe I'll ask Jen just to confirm that for me. But if we are
You're
live,
live.
welcome everyone. Awesome, awesome. Well, welcome everyone. I know we're on the hour right now, but we'll just give a couple minutes for folks to filter in. And I do see the numbers continuing to rise, which is a good sign. And they are continuing to rise, so I will just keep holding on. For those who are just joining us, really appreciate it. We'll just give a couple more minutes. And Jen, I'll let you maybe give me the cue as to when we should kick it off.
Will do.
And just as a little test, if there's a couple of you that want to give us a hand in the chat, if you could just say hi to make sure everything's working, we will want to capture questions there. Please and thank you. Jen, I think the numbers are stabilizing. Should we get going?
Real quick too, Warren, somebody said the chat's disabled.
Okay.
Go ahead and get started and I can enable the chat or work on that.
Okay, perfect. Obviously, there's a lot of content to cover, so we'll get right into it. Sorry for switching the slides all the time. Okay. Just to kick things off, everyone, welcome to the webinar. We're absolutely thrilled you're able to join us. Really quickly, my name is Warren. I'm moderating today, and I happen to be a co-founder of ADAS Depot. Just to set the stage in terms of why we're hosting this webinar, it's because time and time again, our customers tell us, and through our benchmark survey, we've heard that basically the biggest roadblock right now in the ADAS calibration space is having insurance companies understand what this work is and getting it reimbursed. So we wanted to take some time and bring together some great experienced speakers to kind of share their insights, experiences, and best practices around this. Some quick housekeeping. So we have about an hour today. We're going to try to keep the panel discussion to about 45 minutes, saving some time at the end for some questions. Last but not least, we do have a chat box where we're going to be collecting questions to then address at the end. And just a quick outline. So the first section we're going to hit is around identification and justification for calibrations. This will be likely the meat of the conversation. We'll then be getting into documentation to make sure that you get reimbursed, but also to cover your ass. And then lastly, we have a couple topics within the trends in ADAS insurance and beyond. But none of this would be possible without our incredible panelists. So I'll take a second to introduce them. So first and foremost, we have Tony Cuneo. He's a master technician and one of the founding members of Nex Automotive. For those who don't know, Nex is a specialized sublet, and they conduct ADAS calibrations, electrical diagnostics, and repair, plus all of the programming and flashing required with OEM software, among many other things. Tony's got 25 years in the industry, ranging from the mechanical side all the way through to collision. Over the years, he's gained many certifications with OEs, including Mazda, Suzuki, Rivian. He's passionate about teaching and has spent 5 years as an instructor at the Universal Technical Institute, where he taught automotive electrical systems and led the Toyota Lexus TPAP program. About 4 years ago is when Tony dove into ADAS calibrations, where he joined his first ADAS company. Since then, he's built up such a deep knowledge of ADAS calibrations on top of his existing, expertise in factory scan tools and diagnostics. Currently at Next, he leads a team of 31 techs. So it goes without saying that today, Tony brings the perspective of the expert technician to this panel. Next, we have Jeremy Guerrera, who is the head of operations at Next Automotive. 30 years in the industry, specifically in collision. He's touched pretty much every aspect of the collision business, but eventually transitioned into management, where he's overseen both small and large MSOs. This actually led to the opportunity for him to move into the calibration space, and he was a regional director at ProTech, covering the Northern California and Pacific Northwest regions. So Jeremy today is bringing his perspective, having worked for both large calibration MSOs, as well as a newer growing independent calibration business. Last but not least, we have Joel Adcock. He's the Director of Partnerships and Business Development at Revv-ADAS, a group we'll get into in a bit. His career started in the collision world as an estimator with Gates Collision Centers. He got familiar with repair standards for 30 insurance companies, as well as several OEM programs. Before Revv-ADAS, Joel was also a director of marketing and business development at Precision Diagnostics, a collision sublet business. And he was there for over 3 years, helping to grow the company into 9 states with close to 1,500 collision shops. And so today, Joel again brings multiple perspectives, having firsthand experience growing an independent calibration sublet, and now working for a leading ADAS software company. So thank you so much, panelists, for joining. We'll start diving into the meat of the conversation. So we'll start off with identification and justification. Setting the stage again, why is it so important? Identifying calibrations is absolutely cornerstone to like a complete and safe repair. We've probably heard of instances where a sensor or radar is misaligned just by the smallest of margins, and the risk of it leading to a catastrophic outcome. So obviously we want to guarantee a safe repair. Secondly, a lot of us are working for a business or own a business, and frankly, identifying calibrations does drive revenue. So there's 2 very beneficial reasons to identifying all these calibrations, but all of this would be for nothing if you're not justifying it properly with the insurance companies so that you are getting them reimbursed in the end. So just to add some audience participation, we'll start off with a quick poll. And so Jen, if you wouldn't mind kicking that off, please. Just a quick question on currently in your business, how do you currently identify calibrations? You should be able to tick off all of the ones that you currently use. We'll let that run for a little bit. As a side note, I see a lot of these comments coming in. I love to see all of the good mornings and hellos. And again, very happy, thrilled that you can all join. Jen, how's the poll looking? Maybe we can call it at that and just have a quick look.
Let's keep it rolling for a bit longer.
Sounds like the numbers keep going. Maybe as that's going on, I'm actually going to just start getting into the discussion. And moving on to this panel, my first question is for Tony. You've amassed a lot of experience. How do you know when a calibration is actually required?
So besides experience, it's going to be service information. A lot of the car manufacturers use job aids. So those manufacturers are easier to determine when a calibration is needed because it's usually pretty clear on when a calibration is needed. If the manufacturer does not have a job aid, then we're going to start looking into service information. You know, if it's a front bumper hit, we're going to look up the R&R procedure for the bumper or the R&I procedure for the bumper and see at the end if a calibration is needed, like a parking sensor or a front radar, whatever on that front. So just diving into manufacturers' position statements, job aids, service information, and then experience. So.
Got it. Oh, perfect timing. So we see, how do you currently identify calibrations? A really good mix at the moment. And actually for folks who put other, apologies for not capturing it, please in the chat, feel free to share some of the ways that you do identify. But yeah, going back to Tony, and we'll say before identification software hit the market, what was your process for identifying beyond knowing that they're needed?
So the first thing I like to do is get the repair order and see what they're doing to this vehicle. From there, I'll take that, review it, and I'll go to the car and I'll walk it. And I'll move myself, either clockwise or counterclockwise, whatever I'm feeling that day, and move my way around the vehicle and see what technology's on it, touch it, looking for blind spots, sensor lights on the rear mirror, on the A-pillar trim, looking at front radars, if you can see them. Sometimes they're hidden behind the bumper, so it's hard to see. And really just touching it. From there, I'm going to move my way into the vehicle, get the scanner hooked up to it. While that's in process, I'm going to go through the information screen or the instrument cluster and see what I can turn on and off with the ADAS systems and see what's in there on that front. From there, once the scan's done, I'm going to look at the scan and see if there's any codes related to any of the technology in the vehicle and kind of tear into that and see if there's any problems that the software or the vehicle's computer is picking up. From there, really just getting a game plan together as to what the damage is, where the needs are going to be for the calibrations. So
yeah, I see. And I think the main thing I take away from that is, like, you have this built knowledge, almost as an encyclopedia in your mind of knowing sort of the requirements for different OEMs, and then using that, both translating that into your visual inspections as well as your scan tool information. Now, for folks who don't have a Tony on their team, or maybe are in this space a little bit newer, there are tools such as identification software out there. And so, Joel, a question to you is, what is this software? How does it work? How can it help the folks on this call?
Sure. Yeah, thanks, Warren. I appreciate it. And good to see so many people on the call today and taking advantage of this opportunity to learn a little bit more about this stuff. But yeah, so what the identification software can do is it can instantaneously take information from a repair order, referencing it against OE service information or other sources of truth, and create a report that you can use in almost real time to number one, identify which ADAS systems are on the vehicle, and then from that repair plan or line items from the estimate, what have you, from CCC or Mitchell, identify of those ADAS systems, which ones need attention as far as a calibration, some sort of safety operation or functional operation, which thinking about a lot of the answers in the chat here, I see as far as folks referencing going to like AllData or some of the other aggregating platforms, it can take a lot of time in doing that research. And as we know, time is money. With hands-on vehicles, that's where we generate revenue. So being able to quickly identify those calibrations, obviously accuracy is a key component of like what we're looking for with our platform at Revv, is surfacing up information that's easily and readily available, but it also substantiates with documentation why a calibration needs to be done and how to perform that calibration, which, as we know, and sort of why we're here today too, is to talk about kind of getting through some of those barriers with the insurance companies in terms of pushback and making sure we get reimbursed for everything that we do.
Thanks, Joel. I'm actually going to pull up just a sample report here. I've had firsthand experience with Revv before. I am not a Tony, and so I did have to rely on these reports. And I think one of the greatest things about it is just how, and we'll get into the justification side too. But as Tony mentioned, there's service information linked here. There's procedures, but more importantly, the requirement side, right? And so, Joel, you want to speak to that a little bit too?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's, again, as we look at the report here, sort of left to right, you can see that, again, whether you're using Revv, I see some comments around ADAS Think, OneSource ADAS. There's a lot of different platforms that are available out there. What Revv is trying to surface up is, again, that information in real time that provides insight to which calibrations need to be done based on the ADAS systems that are equipped on that vehicle, looking at build with data. And so as we look at the information, we want to identify what triggers from the repair estimate are surfacing up the calibration to be done. What is that particular ADAS system critical for? Or what is it? What's its function? Whether it's a blind spot or forward-facing camera, is it responsible for adaptive cruise control? Which type of calibration should be done? Whether it's static, dynamic, or a dual calibration. And then the links that provide information as far as, again, substantiating why it needs to be done, and then the step-by-step process of, if it's a example of a static calibration, making sure you've got the right equipment, and then what you need to do as far as setting up your targets and all of that information. It really helps shorten that distance, like I said, in terms of time to value, which is always critical in a shop as far as number one, identifying which calibrations need to be done, because in the past it's always been, as we've all heard, no lights, no codes, no issues, no problems, cars going home. Well, there's a lot of underlying information within the reports that provides, even with just a simple bumper R&I or a windshield R&I, or even an alignment may trigger a calibration, which is where a lot of things get lost. So being able to mitigate some of that liability, being able to ensure vehicles are going home safe, and obviously from a potential revenue standpoint too, by identifying those missed calibrations, you can certainly check all three of those boxes at that point.
Thanks, Joel.
You bet.
Now, to reiterate his point, there's a lot of options out there for identification software, and part of it's just doing your homework to see what works best for your business. But there's a theme here too, where no modality, no single way to identify calibrations is perfect. As we know, like a diagnostic tablet doesn't know what kind of repair has gone on with the car, and it'll miss certain calibrations. So Tony, a question back to you, which is, what does the human element look like, whether it's on top of an identification software or on top of a diagnostic tool? If you could speak to just the importance of the human side.
Yeah, I mean, from my experience, it's hard to determine what technology is exactly in the car based off the VIN number, right? So if you're using, an example of Revv, you type in the VIN, that VIN doesn't tell the Revv that it has front parking sensors or rear parking sensors, or certain aspects of the technology that's on the car isn't identified through the VIN. So the human element, the technician's going to have to identify that and then click a box and let Revv know that it does have this technology. And then from there, their software can scrub it and give you that documentation needed to do the cals. So there is always going to be a human element until the VIN is more accurate with what technology comes on the car. So.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you. So folks, that sort of covers the identification side, and more than happy for you guys to start asking those questions if you want to dig deeper towards the end. But I wanted to hit an extremely important side of the conversation, which is just justification. So you can identify them all you want, and you can submit them for reimbursement, but unless you're justifying it, you're not going to get paid. And so over to Jeremy, head of operations. You deal with these interactions all day, every day. Can you talk to me about the process of justification and getting paid?
I mean, I wish I had the overwhelming answer for everybody on this call. If we had an easy button for this, I mean, I wish I could share that, but we know kind of how this is going. In the beginning, the ADAS portion of the industry was kind of a gold mine for a lot of people. They're jumping in, doing the calibrations, giving invoices and walking away. But we know as this evolves, this portion of the industry is changing dramatically. Insurance companies are getting savvy and educating themselves on what needs to be done and what doesn't. So the big deals that are going through with Aztec and Geico and all these heavy players in the space, but on a smaller operational side, from my experience, it's three basic things that you have to do to navigate these. It's education, communication, and relationship. I mean, you have to keep it simple. Like, how are you educating them, teaching them what ADAS is, when it's needed, providing the service information that Tony talked about, the job aids that are kind of that overwhelming statement for the specific manufacturers, but you have to also hook to the tool to get certain things out of Euros. So that stuff's not always available. So it's just providing that documentation when you send the invoice, so they have that to relay it to the insurance companies. The communication piece also falls into that. How you're giving it to them. You know, you can't just hand it to them, expect them to do it. You have to explain it. You have to highlight it. You have to zoom in and give them the specifics to give that to the insurance companies. With Revv being a report that you can use that has hyperlinks to all that stuff, our process is a little bit more manual. The thing that has been significant in us getting the ability to get to bill these how we're supposed to is the pre-bill process. We do everything on the front end, providing the invoice and all the service information into the MSO we worked with, into their management system directly, so they have that at their fingertips. You can also, you know, create your own mini indexes of service information to share with the shops, but everything on the front end has kind of been that secret sauce for us, is just giving it to them right out the gate, having everything locked in, know what the car needs at the end of the blueprint process, because we know in the collision space, they want one supplement. Getting a large ADAS bill at the end of the job just doesn't do us any good. And then you're in this tug of war. A customer wants to pick up the car, but we're charging extra money. We got to get authorizations. There's so many variables to it. So as much as we can do on the front end is going to make this whole process go a lot smoother and fix that relationship you have with that shop. Like, you have to mentor them, you have to coach them, you have to educate them. A lot of people just don't know what this space takes to get the job done correctly. So how do you be that supporting role to make sure you're there for them?
Yeah, I think it's just fascinating where, you know, we think life's the perfect world where you give the right documentation and it's like, okay, like I'm rational and I understand it. But to your point, it is a new space. People don't understand the level of work that you guys do, which is something we will get into later on. There's a lot of expertise that goes beyond just measurements and placing a target. And so it's interesting how, yeah, just humans are humans and relationships count for a lot. But again, I just want to reiterate to the group here, the importance of the pre-billing side, right? And setting yourself up for success. And if that pushback comes, it's at least you can hit it on sooner rather than later. Awesome. So next we're going to move on to documentation. This will be a bit more of show and tell, if that's okay. Where Tony and Jeremy, I'm going to pass it to you guys and just sort of walk us through your process and like what kind of documents you're keeping, what kind of documents you're submitting to insurance.
So yeah, I mean, when we walk up to a car, we're gonna scan it. We're gonna take some photos of it. We like to get all four corners. So we have some documentation of what this car looked like when it came in, specifically focusing on the damaged area. We're gonna picture the mileage and the VIN. Then we're going to get the pre-scan. We like to do a pre-scan before clear and a pre-scan after clear to see what's really related to the accident, see what codes are hard faults, and assess those from there. When the car's coming back to us, well, I think even before like a pre-calibration check, by checking tire pressures and fuel weight, we really want to come back and touch that vehicle again after it's tore down to see if there's anything that we missed during the pre-scan process, to see if something got damaged under the bumper that we couldn't see if there's any wiring damages, things like that, see if there's extra structural damage that we couldn't notice. So coming back to the car and getting hands on it after teardown's a really important step in our process. Some manufacturers want alignment done after an accident, or at least checked. So getting it on the alignment rack and seeing what, if any calibrations or any alignment angles need to be adjusted or anything like that. And if those are adjusted, what calibrations are triggered because of it. Then digging into service information and supplying that documentation. We have direct access into the estimating software for our companies that we work for, and we're able to load those right in there, so there's no emails or anything lost in translation. From there, we're getting the calibration process and setup. We're including those documents. We're going to include photos of that, the setup, how far out our targets are, just an overall assessment so we can prove that we did it right. Some of the calibration equipment provides reports that tells us where exactly the targets are, so that's good information to include as well. Your post-scan report is a huge, very important, you know, that we make sure that this car is getting returned back to the customer with no codes or any problems. And then finally, the invoice, you know, what we did, what we're asking to get paid for, and yeah, just summarizing everything that we did.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that, Tony. Now, I failed to mention at the top, and it's a better question for the panelists. Maybe starting with Joel, it's what is the risk of a shop that isn't capturing all of this information? Like how could it bite them in the butt?
Well, I think first and foremost, if the documentation isn't substantiated as far as the insurance company is concerned, there's that immediate pushback, you know, as far as, you know, why did you do something? Why are you invoicing if we don't have documentation to justify why we did what we did? I think with that as well is being able to justify to your vehicle owner, the customer, of, you know, doing what you were supposed to do in terms of, you know, validating safety, you know, throughout the repair process, obviously on post repair too, for doing calibrations and whatever else comes with that. So I think it gives, as a business owner, it can give you peace of mind that you've followed all the appropriate steps, provided that documentation to you know, not only the insurance company, but potentially to the vehicle owner as well. I think there's an opportunity to continue to educate vehicle owners as far as why things need to be done. You know, they're buying their vehicles now with more ADAS functionality and safety systems. The demand is increasing for those systems to be on vehicles as they purchase those cars. It has to be part of that conversation as well during the repair process, as far as you know, whether we're calibrating adaptive cruise controls or blind spots, and then being able to validate that information with documentation to help justify exactly why we're doing it and have those conversations with them.
Right. And Jeremy, to you, a question is around, again, and more on the operations side, is traditionally, how have you guys stored this information? Because, you know, you can't refer back to it if it isn't stored. But also there's different trends now with insurance companies and how they want the documents stored. So are you able to speak to that?
Yeah. I think Joel also hit it on the head with all the safety stuff. The documentation side of things is always a tough one to navigate, how to get it, how to store it, how to give it to the shop, to give it to the adjuster that goes to the reviewer. There's such a path of resistance there which it gets lost in translation. Some of the things we've been entertaining is direct communication with the insurance partner themselves, creating like how Revv has an access portal for the customer facing side of things. Internally on our side, like how do we become a preferred partner or a DRP directly for an insurance carrier, just to not really sidestep the collision center, but to have that streamlined access to all that information that Tony had spoke to, everything at their fingertips. It makes it easier for that whole process to be completed. That back and forth where you have to explain something and refer to SI and add additional documentation just makes the whole process very cumbersome. So entertaining any ideas we can to make that approval process from pre-billing all the way to how we provide that documentation on a portal access could be huge for the industry.
That's interesting. Sorry to go a little bit off tangent, but who does that lie with? Like, who does the responsibility lie with? Do you think it's the insurance companies that need to build that portal? Is that something that on the industry side, there needs to be an effort to centralize that information?
I think it's on us. I mean, we're the ones kind of evolving this industry. We need to be the ones to have an easy access point to get all this information. It's so overwhelming for a lot of shops to navigate. We need to be the ones to create it. I think Revv has a great platform to kind of start the ball rolling, and they do a great job with it. But on a smaller level, on a mom and pop style shop, how do you give that to them in an easier fashion?
Yeah, it's true. And like going back to what Tony walked us through, there's a lot of components to it, and
yeah,
managing all those files, like it's important to get it to the right people at the right time. Thank you. So at this point, covered off identification, justification, and documentation. Would love to dive a little bit into some trends before we get into the questions from the audience. It sounds like it's a pretty lively chat in there, which I love to see. I wanted to build on one of the comments that you mentioned, Jeremy. It's like the relationship side with insurance companies, and you're going to need that beyond providing all the right documents. And so specifically getting into some of the tactics, I don't want to say tactics, but what are some of the ways in which you have built up that relationship with insurance companies, estimators, adjusters? Let's give the folks some concrete examples.
It's just that one-on-one relationship like you're talking about, going into the shop, spending time with the service advisors, getting to know the shop managers, what their DRP contracts restrictions are. It's a case-by-case basis, but how you can be the mentor or educator in this space is huge. Even if they do get some pushback or a change request on their side, I've even had times where I've reached out to that adjuster directly on the insurance side and had those conversations and expressing and showing examples of why this needs to be completed from the service information. Also, if they're denying the calibration and you're not going to calibrate this, that puts the customer more at risk once that vehicle's back on the road. If you calibrate it, it could mitigate costs for you guys down the road. If you are calibrating it, that car is going to operate correctly and maybe work itself out of a collision. So it's just that relationship, even from the technician all the way to the adjuster for the insurance company, how you interact with them, how you provide the information, and just be there to support them.
Yeah, and I actually
to add to that
Absolutely.
too, it's really building those relationships with the insurance agents. I mean, if you see them at the shop checking out a car, introduce yourself, talk to them, earn their trust. When you're submitting these claims and these estimates, invoices to these insurance companies, if you mess up one time, they're going to question you and then not trust you. And, so building that, giving them the documentation they need to make the decision of whether they're going to approve it or not is really going to help establish that relationship with that insurance company. I saw a lot of people in there talking about State Farm and getting paid from State Farm. We have a contact there that we can, contact and bounce things off to. Why do you think they're kicking this one back? and really learning why they're doing what they're doing. So we also like to have like an open house where we invite insurance partners over to see all the equipment and space and all the things needed to do these things properly. So those things will help too. I think they've helped us.
Absolutely. And Tony actually should have started the conversation here, which is there's such an element of folks not understanding the expertise, the time that goes into ADAS calibrations. I think it's easy to look at it on the outside and say like, oh, with these camera systems, you just put it in place and then you press a button and it's calibration. But can you, talk us through what a conversation with an adjuster looks like when that deeper level of diagnostics is needed, and what kind of time and energy you have to put into that?
It's really just explaining to them how, like, I like to use front radar as an example, right? We did a Honda and front radar passed, no problem. We get out on the street. As soon as we get on the street, we engage the cruise control and the car stops on a dime. Like literally at 40 miles an hour, we hit cruise control on and it stopped. And it just passed calibration, So building those relationships and letting them know that this car with this system can stop at any speed that it deems necessary because it sees an obstruction in front of it, whether it does or it doesn't, whether it's working properly or not, is going to determine whether another car plows into the back of that and really injures both parties at stake. So overlooking these things is a thing of the past, I feel. And people who are overlooking them are really putting their customers in danger. So just giving them examples of like the one I told you when engaging that cruise control and the car stops. We've seen one with license plates covering the radar, and as soon as you turn it on, it sees metal in front of it and it stops the car. So those little things make a huge difference. So
yeah, and these sensors are also so interlinked with the electrical systems too, right? And I feel like one thing that sometimes gets overlooked is a lot of the times, the expert technicians do require a lot of that depth knowledge can speak to as well.
I'm sorry, you broke up a little bit there, Warren.
Oh, sorry about that. Yeah, I was just saying that, the electrical system is so intertwined with these sensors. And I think people forget how the expertise on that side is really needed and applied. So I was wondering if you could just speak to that a bit.
Yeah, I mean, I worked on I think it was a Ford Explorer just the other day that the shop brought it over for us to do the calibrations, and we were actually doing it was a Ford, and we were doing the rear parking sensor azimuth test, and they brought it over and said the rear parking sensors were working. I go to test it and they're not. And once we got the bumper off and really dove into this thing and started doing some electrical tests, we found that 2 of the wires plugged into one of the middle sensors had come loose from the terminal, but was still plugged. The wire was still in the back of the connector, so you couldn't tell that it was broken. Not until we did some ohm tests and did a little pull test on that was found 2 wires just pulled right out, and it was right on the impacted sensor. So being able to go in there and electrically diagnose these things with an ohm meter or voltage drop test or things like that really helps you not have to sublet it to the dealer or another shop or something like that.
Yeah. So. And I think that's just invisible time that isn't seen on the ADAS calibration side that is so integral to being able to provide that full service. And Joel, just to you, any other words on this side where like value of calibrations and relationships with insurance partners?
Yeah, I think it's a worthy conversation to have, with folks from the insurance side. They're curious about it. They want to know, they want to prepare their teams with, why certain calibrations need to be done, or, just kind of rifling through the documentation and, speaking from a life previous when I was at Precision Diagnostics, we would have conversations with insurance companies, not necessarily to align with them by any stretch because we advocated for our customers who were body shops, but the conversation came from the insurance companies wanting to learn and know more about, the justification pieces, the documentation, how we invoice, certainly why is our pricing maybe a little bit different than like what the dealer's pricing is, and obviously having that straight line to understand that from our perspective, we could get our cars done quicker, right? Than not to pick on the dealers, but generally speaking, when you would send a car to a dealership, there's potentially some delays there where the car can sit there. Now the insurance company is thinking about the additional costs of rental and things like that. So when you start to make those considerations, which it's been said 1,000 times before, but it's back to the basics of just communication. Having candid conversations with the folks that are interested. There are certainly going to be insurance companies that, depending on which market you in, or depending on which adjuster's handling that file, they just ultimately want to put up a fight on paying for a calibration for whatever reason, whether they want to read the documentation or not. Sometimes you just have to pick your battles. And again, speaking from previous experience, if it was something that we were going to do that the insurance company wasn't going to pay for, we weren't going to invoice the shop for that. But we wanted to do the calibration. In fact, we insisted on doing it because it was right to do by the vehicle owner in the car itself. And whether it was, eating the cost of a couple $100, not getting paid for that calibration, we as a company could feel better knowing that what we were doing was right by the vehicle owner and putting somebody back in a car safe. So probably not going to win every single battle. There will be certainly difficulties with different insurance companies, and depending on which market you're in, and which adjuster is handling that file. But again, it's not to say that it doesn't necessarily should prevent you from having a direct conversation with them if they are interested in learning about it, because they certainly are. They've got turnover, they've got new folks coming on board, and it's important to them. Obviously, they're paying the bill most times. And again, kind of circling back to what we talked about previously, preparation is key. Being able to pre-bill or get pre-authorization, providing documentation. If you can get a lot of that stuff done on early at the front end of the car, still being in process at the shop versus it being gone, it's going to solve a lot of headaches in that regard.
Awesome. Appreciate the insights. We're getting low on time, so I'll just pose one last question / topic. It goes without saying that a lot of these vehicles, manufacturers are throwing up these security gateways. They're making it more difficult to interact with their latest models and vehicles. So first question is just to Tony. I mean, can you talk about this and this trend of needing more and more OEM tooling?
Yeah, I mean, all data and a lot of the aftermarket scan companies have access into secure gateways, but a lot of them functionalities aren't there. Certain functions within the scanner aren't there. So having the ability to rely on the OE scanner is very important, I feel, in this industry. Honestly, my experience using aftermarket, it's like, oh, okay, well, the OE procedure in ALLDATA or Sun or whatever platform you're using to find your service info tells me I got to go into this feature in the factory scanner, but it doesn't tell me how to do it with the Autel. Does the Autel even do it? Can I go in there and find it? So that's kind of the touch and see kind of thing with those scanners. Is it capable of doing what the OE scanner does? So always having that question in the back of your mind doesn't help your confidence as a technician if you're going to be able to get this job done correctly. So we really like using OE. They're harder to learn. You can buy a day pass on some of them, and just go in there for the day and figure it out. But more and more manufacturers are going to use the secure gateway. I think Toyota's launching one in February where you're going to have to need it for GTS, and I think most of the manufacturers are going to end up going this route. So,
I think one really interesting conversation that has popped up is the ROI of various OEM softwares too, right? I mean, they range in cost, they range in how many logins you get, and quite frankly, I think this could be its own entire conversation webinar, which is something we should think about. But I think one thing, just maybe before we conclude on this piece, is Jeremy, Joel, you want to speak to some of these solutions to OEM? Like, let's say you don't have the means to invest in it yourself. Like, how can folks on this call at least access it some way?
Yeah, I can speak to that first. We are very OE heavy. We've realized the need for the OE software just to, what Tony's saying, to navigate some of those secure gateway modules to ensure the calibration is being done correctly, but also leveraging Remote Expert. I mean, I think Remote Expert's been a huge platform for a lot of smaller companies to either remote in and Tony kind of take hold with our software to allow them to use the factory information and software to complete that calibration. But if you don't have it, I think Remote Expert is probably the best thing at this point to get access to it, or at least reach out for help in a certain way.
Yeah, and I should have been more clear about this. For folks on the line, the experts at Next, it does have to be through an Autel platform. You can connect with them directly. They can apply this OEM software, but not only that, you can actually reach out to the technicians and get consultation. Like, hey, I'm stuck on this troubled car. I see a lot of conversations going on in chat where it's a lot of sharing of information. I think platforms, like we would call it remote programming, some other options, you've heard of your Aztecs, you've heard of your Air Pros. It's important to be aware that these exist. You don't always just have to send a vehicle to the dealership, and you can keep more of it in-house. Joel, any last thoughts before we move on to the questions?
Yeah, I think the overarching theme on this is, and again, coming from previous experience on this, we were both heavy on OE as much as we could with access, getting access to the equipment. Sometimes there was back orders or, maybe cost prohibitive in certain instances, but then having a mix of alternatives, through, an aftermarket platform, just for the flexibility that you could have, controlling some of the costs and so forth, and some of the coverage pieces of it as well. But I think having alternatives like you mentioned, Warren, with like the Air Pros or Aztecs, or even through the remote export platforms, being able to have that straight line access to the OE information is always going to be critical and crucial. And as I think the OEs get a bit more involved in some of the things that are going on in the ADAS world with, I haven't heard anything specifically, but I've, rumor of maybe controlling a bit more of ADAS functionality at a subscription level, and getting access through different gateways and things like that. I mean, it may be something that's more prevalent in the near future than what we're currently seeing. So
appreciate it. So I think let's conclude on the future trends piece. And I'm going to start perusing the chat. I'll also ask Jen if there's anything that you see we should hit first. Holy, there's a lot. There's a lot here. I don't even know where to start.
Yeah, if we can get everybody to hit the Q&A button at the bottom, and please put any questions there, just because it is pretty hard for us to go through the chat. I do see one from Richie that says, how do you address the OE requirements regarding the room size, lighting, floor leveling, etc., when an insurance company wants us to utilize a mobile ADAS vendor?
I would probably start with supplying them with that document that says you need this much space, and really emphasize that, the space is critical. They wouldn't tell you need this much space if you didn't need it, so we've seen radars pick up a steel pole in the middle of the shop because we set it up too close to that pole, and you can get skewed readings and car's not going to perform like it should.
Yeah, I think it's being prepared with the documentation, and also, like, Tony, knowing the environment you will be working in as a mobile technician, right? And making sure that your customer is giving you the right space to do the calibrations, right? Another question that I see here is, do you believe security gateways will impact J2534 hardware platforms? I don't know if you guys want to speak to this or if this is more like a question for the hardware manufacturers, right? You know, the Opuses
Yeah,
and Autos, but is that fair to say?
yeah.
Question for Joel. It's a bit more specific to Rev. Just sort of the fee schedule, and do you guys have access for smaller shops to pay on a per use basis?
Yeah, currently everything with Rev is on a monthly subscription. You know, we're always actively investigating which pricing models make sense for us and for our customers specifically, and getting that feedback. And that's something that we've heard is on a per use or per VIN basis as far as billing goes. At this particular point, that does not exist. Doesn't mean that it necessarily won't exist at some particular point, because there is, you know, certainly demand there and appetite for that. So wish I had a better answer for you, Dan, but at this particular point, it's not quite to that point.
Thanks, Joel. Folks on the line, I know there was a very busy chat, and I would ask you to please bring over your questions to the Q&A section so we can keep it going. So I have a question from Mike. He's saying, when using the information sent from softwares like ADAS Think, Rev, that have links for the manufacturer's position, if it's not a direct link to the manufacturer's site or software, how do they actually prove the actual information, right? So I think a lot of the times it links to, say, all data and some of those repositories. How do you get around that?
So I can speak to like how Rev, we offer up, number one, we'll offer up position statements directly from the OEM within a Rev report, so you can access exactly what those position statements are. Now, for linkage to actual documentation above and beyond that, and also for steps on how to complete the calibration, we may reference links out to whatever we find as the best source of truth, whether that's all data, OEM one stop, what have you. We've got, you know, different vendors or agreements that we work with in terms of being able to source up that information. So first and foremost, you'd always see the position statement, so you can access that to get the most up-to-date information there. And then obviously the link data will go to, again, whatever source of truth that we find to be the most relevant and accurate information.
Thanks, Joel. I see a really interesting question from Tim, which is, what is everyone doing for vehicles that are not coming to you in stock shape? You know, raised truck, lowered truck, things of that nature. One thing that I will say, Tim, is coming away from the CIC conference, there's a group out of SEMA, their R&D department, that has been doing some really interesting research, and they've actually published it recently. I'll have to try to link that information. But essentially, they've done live tests with several vehicles, raised and lowered. They do find you are able to calibrate them, but there are some peculiarities to keep in mind. But Tony, I would love to hear, have you had any experience with that yourself firsthand?
Sorry, I was reading somebody else's question. Can you repeat that?
Just related to like modified vehicles, let's say raised truck, lowered truck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I've done several of all of the above. It's really, I honestly, I tell the customer, like, the vehicle's raised, it's not going to act like it's designed to perform. So I would be very cautious when using this system. I calibrated it to its current height. I can go in there and I can change, like, let's say it's a Toyota and it's lifted 2 inches in the front. I'll add 2 inches to the camera height measurement when I'm, as far as where the camera height is on the car when you're typing that into the scan tool, and letting it know that the camera is at that higher height, right? The target's still at its correct height. I don't raise it, you know, and just trying to figure out a way to make this car function like it's supposed to, and still be somewhat safe for the customer, but it's a fine line. There's definitely a liability there. You know what I mean? And it's really communicating to the customer, like, you changed this vehicle. The manufacturers designed it with these safety features in it that are going to prevent you from running in the back of another car. And you changed where this thing's looking, it's going to act different, you know? So really, you know, maybe having a release of liability, you know, if your vehicle is modified, we calibrated the system to the best that we can. Ultimately, it's not going to perform like it's supposed to. So it's
Yeah,
tough.
thank
You know,
you.
we've seen guys put 10-inch lifts on a Ford F-350, and we had to end up partnering with them and creating the custom bracket and all these things. It's just, it's
Huh.
a nightmare, you know what I mean? And it's something that a lot of people don't want to accept the liability for it. So I don't blame them either.
Yeah, and what this reminds me of too is just sort of one of the conclusions out of that talk at CIC again, SEMA's research and development was the OEMs are going to continue saying that anything outside of that spec, you know, you can't calibrate. But finally, we have an industry voice with SEMA that's showing you, yes, you can calibrate it. The systems do continue to work. There's a level of tolerance, right? Again, a 10-inch lift that I don't think was within their tolerance, but I'd ask folks to look into that study, and I'll try to pull it and maybe send it to this group. Before, well, I think we're looking at time, and Tony, I know you were looking at questions. Is there one that you wanted to hit, or all esteemed panelists, if you're having a look through the questions, anything you wanted to touch on?
Yeah, I was going to mention here real quick, Warren. Patrick asked about sharing that ADAS calibration start to finish process. I think that, like the kind of that walkthrough of all of the documentation, I think that's very helpful from a visual standpoint. So I thought that was of interest.
Yeah, I think for the folks on the line, we have recorded this as well as I'm happy to share the slides. There's not too many, to be honest, so we can definitely share those.
I know somebody asked earlier about a pre-bill, what a pre-bill looks like from Next. I don't know if you want to post that. I think that was on one of the slides when we were showing our documentation tab. I see somebody put on there something about lawyers don't care if it's somewhat safe. I agree. You know, I mean, but what do? Do you turn this car back to the customer with all these lights on with, you know, and then what? They're not happy. They didn't bring the car in this way. It didn't, you know, whoever lifted it didn't do the cals for it to even look in a different place. So it's a fine line, you know, so where do you draw it? It's really up to you and where you want to place yourself in this industry.
Yeah. Jeremy, to put you on the spot, have you seen a question that catches your eye?
I think there was one about when you provide all the documentation, but the insurance company still just does not want to pay. That's just those one-off scenarios where you just go to battle for the shop. You know, you want to be as open and honest as possible, make it very cut and dry, highlighting it, you know, sending it to the adjuster directly. And that's where I talked about it before, is you pick up the phone and call them if you get that information and have that very honest conversation. But Joel also touched on it too. Like, you kind of get to that point where customer wants their car back. We're going to do what's right. We're going to calibrate this car. If I have to lose a little bit to ensure the customer is safe, that's the stance I'm going to take. I mean, it's a little give and take. You're going to win a lot of them. You're going to have to lose some. But if it's a trend that you start to see, like we all know, State Farm has been very difficult lately. Those are higher level conversations you need to have with the shop, with the adjuster. You know, it's a tough situation to navigate.
Yeah, and I think the overarching thing too is, as an industry, not sure who takes the lead to like bring the whole voice together for the industry, but to, you know, be the first ones on the front foot to set standards, not letting insurance companies set that standard. I think is something that all of us need to think about and explore. I know we're coming up to time. So first and foremost, to the speakers, Tony, Jeremy, Joel, it was an absolute honor to have you guys on. Thank you so much for providing all of your insights. I think one thing I take away from here too is that there's so much conversation going on in chat. And it's just a reminder to us to keep providing platforms to have this discussion because, again, everyone's learning. I know certainly us at ADAS Depot, this is something we're very passionate about, bringing people together, sharing the voice. A quick little announcement that we will be doing a benchmark survey coming out soon, so we'll put that out towards to this group. Final little shout out. So Next Automotive, they're our preferred tech support partner. If you need any of those services, OEM programming, things like that, please reach out. I would love to put them in touch with you. Same with identification software, Revv. If you have any questions, I saw a lot of questions in chat about that. Reach out to us. We'll put you in touch with the right people so that everyone has that solution. And I see you get back to work, everyone. You're correct. We're at time.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time, guys. Appreciate you joining.
Thanks, Warren. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.